Sir Kannan Gopalakrishnan. He was working as a senior architect at Engineering Design Research Centre, L&T Construction, India's largest construction company. He's also worked on projects ranging from institutional buildings to international airports, apartment complexes to aircraft hangars. He's also attended 3 international conferences and 2 national conferences, and has also presented technical papers at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, and the MSRIT, Bangalore. He's also won the national championship at Archaman at the India's largest architecture quiz. Sir Kannan Gopalakrishnan currently runs a design firm, Habitat Design Studio, and he is also a visiting faculty at the renowned architecture schools in Tamil Nadu.
Welcome back to UGC lecture series. This is AR 6006 Structure and Architecture. We are in units 3 and 4. We are looking at contemporary structural expression through case studies. This is lecture 13 and we are doing some case studies of complex structural expression through steel and concrete and various other materials to explain architecture. In the previous episode, we would remember looking at famous case studies of British Pavilion Expo 1992, Sevilla, Spain, and Waterloo International Train Terminal, UK, both designed by the famous architect Sir Nicholas Grimshaw. And in this episode, we will be looking at 2 interesting buildings designed by Sir Norman Foster again. The 2 interesting buildings, one located in Hong Kong and the other located in New York City, both are very big business sites. Hong Kong and New York, the fastest economies in the world. The first is a bank building for Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, HSBC headquarters in Hong Kong, and the second building is Hearst Tower, which is in New York City. We will straight away go into the first building, Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, HSBC headquarters, Hong Kong. This building was conceived during a sensitive period in the former colony's history. The brief for Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking headquarters was a statement of confidence to create the best bank building in the world. Through a process of questioning and challenging, including the involvement of a Feng Shui geomancer, the project addressed the nature of banking in Hong Kong and how it should be expressed in built form. With all these expressions and with a Feng Shui geomancer and the brief being as simple and as powerful as the best bank building in the entire world, Sir Norman Foster gave us this building. This is the HSBC building. You see dominating the skyline of Hong Kong. This is one of the interior views of the building where you can see the structural bracing systems, and here we can see the open offices where people are working. These are the different floors and this is the bracing system that you see here. From the concept to commissioning, it took 7 years for the building to be entirely built. The building is 180 meters tall with 47 stories and 4 basement levels. The building has modular design consisting of 5 steel modules prefabricated in the UK near Glasgow and shipped to Hong Kong. About 30,000 tons of steel and 4,500 tons of aluminium were used in the building. 30,000 tons of steel and 4,500 tons of aluminium to create this monstrous building that you see in front of us. And what you see in the picture on the left is a night view of this portion of the building. You see the night view is something so massive and so elegant. In doing so, it virtually reinvented the office tower. The requirement to build in excess of 1 million square feet in a short time scale suggested a high degree of prefabrication, including a factory finished modules, while the need to build downwards and upwards simultaneously led to the adoption of suspension structure with pairs of steel masts arranged in 3 bays. The brief was simple but powerful. They needed to build the best bank in the world and they need to keep it simple, and they need to have completed the entire building in 7 years, which means that 7 years to build in excess of 1 million square feet of office space is a massive work for which one needs to be extremely careful about the kind of technology he uses, because that is why Foster used high-tech factory finished modules and a very high degree of prefabrication in this building. As a result, the building form is articulated in a stepped profile of 3 individual towers, respectively 29, 36 and 44 stories tall, which create the floors of varying width and depth and allow for garden terraces. The massed structure allowed another radical move, pushing the service cores to the perimeter to create a deep plan floors and about 10-story atrium. They need not put the services inside the middle of the building because they had pushed it to the periphery. It was a very radical move there, because on the inside, instead of putting the services and blocking the entire view of the building from another, these people were able to create a beautiful atrium right in the middle. And with all the services going on the sides, it was a very clever move because they had a bigger floor plan area for people to work and enjoy working. This is another evening view of the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, which is right in the middle here. Here we see the different buildings, the first building, the second building and the third building. A mirrored sun scoop reflects sunlight down through the atrium to the floor of a public plaza below, a sheltered space which at weekends has become a lively picnic spot. From the plaza, escalators rise up through the glass underbelly to the banking hall, which was conceived as a shop window for banking. The bridges that span between the masts define the double height reception areas that break down the scale of a building both visually and socially. Here you see the grand lobby in this place, which becomes a picnic spot during the weekends. This is the top of the building where you can see the structural elements of the building, and you can see the different ways in which the heights the building plays in the volumes. The difference in volumes creates terraces in between so that people can move up and enjoy the outside exterior. A unique system of movement through the building combines high-speed lifts to the reception spaces with escalators beyond, reflecting village-like clusters of office floors. From the outside, the bank placed a high priority on flexibility. Interestingly, over the years, it has been able to reconfigure office layouts with ease, even incorporating a large dealer's room into one floor, a move that could not have been anticipated when the building was designed. These are the escalators that they were talking about, massive escalators that lead from the ground floor to the banking floor on top, which they call it the single window floor, which is on top. This is one of the concept design drawing which Norman Foster made. Look at the 3 buildings, the shorter building and the taller ones. Look at how he has drawn the sketch, and look at how the building turned out to be. It's pretty amazing how architects are able to conceive the building at such an early stage, and when they are able to design the building in exactly the way they wanted. They wanted this kind of a building with a helipad on top with views on this side. They exactly wanted this, and look at how amazingly clever the architect is, being able to visualize everything that they wanted right in the beginning of the project itself. This is the portion outside the front lobby, a famous picnic spot in the weekends. There people can enjoy this area. Martin Pauly says about HSBC headquarters, Foster and his team were working on the other side of the world, in another culture with a simultaneously cosmopolitan and native face. In the end, the building was not the creation of electronic international banking, nor a semi-colonial gift from an old power to an younger one. Its design grew more than anything else from an unprecedented act of learning. This is a scale model of the building in which you can see the different service codes and different things which are designed. Martin Pauly also says that legend has it that Foster received only one director from the bank director Roy Munden when he won the architectural competition for the job in 1979. Build me the best bank in the world. When the architect got down to business, the only other directive that emerged from him was to keep it simple. This is a picture of they were talking about this place being, the lobby space being used as a weekend getaway. So this is another way in which people explore the weekend picnic areas in the lobby of the building. Ray Guy says that the bank is very fluid in its staff movements. The design had to reflect that, and it also had to reflect the changes that are coming into the banking. We were the first electronic bank in the Far East, and the rest of the world has now caught up. Now we are taking a 10-year step, and the building has had to reflect that. It has also had to confront everyday changes within the building, because we move approximately 50% of the building every year in terms of office accommodation. So flexibility had to be built into the building. This is another view of another model which they made, a cut model of the lobby and the office areas. Foster himself talks about the building. Many buildings are statements of confidences in the future. So they are inextricably linked to the political process which generate the need, and some of that is really highly symbolic. The bank was certainly no exception. It was a very considered move as a vehicle to enhance the prosperity of that particular bank, which has since moved dramatically into the World League. But it was also a symbol of confidence in the future of the colony. By symbol of confidence, Norman Foster means the brief that was given to him. Imagine an architect getting a brief which says only these few words: build me the best bank in the world. It is a mark of confidence to say that they already know that they are the best bank in the world, and they just need a building to accommodate their facilities and their services into their premises. They just wanted the best building to complement the best banking system that they already have. Look at the amount of confidence that they have. That is a symbol of confidence which Foster is talking about here. These are some of the pictures of how the building features, different languages the building tries to use. They tried out different color schemes. Chris Abel says about HSBC headquarters that there is a lot more that is Gothic than classical in all its structural and spatial magic. Contrary statements about Foster's work notwithstanding, if the medieval services towers, the flying braces, and the incomplete appearance of the building had not already promoted the idea, then the soaring proportions of the atrium and the great translucent eastern window easily justify the building's popular description as the Cathedral of Commerce. Chris Abel compares this building to a medieval cathedral, a Gothic cathedral, wherein he tries to compare the different features of this building and puts it in his own way. He says that there's a lot more of it which is Gothic rather than classical, which creates a spatial magic, and he calls the flying braces, he compares it with the flying buttresses of the Gothic structures, and he tries to get the idea of how the light is brought into the building, and he also tries to compare the soaring proportions of the atrium with respect to the proportions of the nave which cathedrals create in that time period. And he also says that this building is an epitome of what we call the Cathedral of Commerce. So it's actually a cathedral, but not a Gothic or a neo-Gothic or a classical cathedral, but it's a modern cathedral for modern day commerce that we should be proud of. Hai Piaman says that the aesthetic of Hong Kong Bank is a wholly result of its method of construction, an aesthetic that is not confined to the exterior but permeates the whole internal life of the building. At every suspended in the sky, every visible structural component evidently has an important role within the load bearing capacity. That is both earnest and restless, and quite unlike a conventional office tower, where big efforts are made to make internal spaces as neutral as those found in any low rise building. By lifting the main body of the building above the ground and creating a glass underbelly, we allowed the banking to be seen as a dynamic activity. The banking hall now becomes a showcase to be viewed from the plaza below. Norman Foster calls this whole thing as intentional, because he wanted the banking floor to be viewed from the plaza below, because plaza is a place where people gather during the weekends. It's very, very crowded. It's almost looking like a picnic spot. That's what they say about the place. But what Foster wanted was, instead of boarding up all the windows and painting the walls in a neutral shade in such a way that to create a boring office atmosphere, was not his type of building. He wanted the building to show its power, to show its confidence. So he throwed the view open from the plaza to the banking area itself. From the plaza below, they were able to see the banking area. That is the confidence which the bank has installed in Norman Foster. Thereby, he also confidently created this view, complementing the brief which he had received. Stephen Gardiner says that communication, again, the building is the village, the office group is the community, and the escalator is the lane. In Foster's imagery, you could call them that. Stephen Gardiner is a famous critic, and he says that it is all about communication. He compares every component of a building with our community, with the neighborhood that we live in, and he calls the entire building group as the community, and escalators as little lanes which people keep moving from one area to another, and the whole building he compares it with a village. And thereby, in Foster's imagery, he calls them the little pockets of neighborhood in a big village, and that is what HSBC banking is about, to create network of closely knit officials so that they become like a family. There is a sense of belonging, and that is when they could join hands to create the most powerful bank in the world. The next famous building that we're going to look at is in the city of New York. It's called the Hearst Tower. The first look at the building, it is a diamond shaped building with a lot of jags and cuts, a whole quantity of glass and steel on the outside, with a very, very traditional contrasting background for the first 5 or 6 floors on the ground level. So there is a sharp contrast in the buildings up to the first 6th floor and then to the remaining floors. Hearst Tower revives a dream from the 1920s, when publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst envisaged Columbus Circle as a new media headquarters in Manhattan. Hearst commissioned a 6-story Art Deco block on the 8th Avenue, anticipating that it would eventually form the base of a tower, though no such scheme was ever advanced. This is the 6-story Art Deco building that the Hearst had commissioned earlier. Although this advancement in this building was not envisaged earlier, but then he imagined that this Art Deco building would be the base of any new addition in this building. The sharp lines of the Art Deco building and the sharp lines of this contemporary expression matches its course. Look at the sharp lines which Foster had created here, and the sharp lines which the Art Deco building has got. Echoing an approach developed in the Reichstag and the Great Court at the British Museum, the challenge in designing such a tower at 70 years remove was to establish a creative dialogue between the old and the new. The new tower rises above the old building to a height of 44 stories, linked on the outside by a skirt of glazing that encourages an impression of the tower floating weightlessly above the base. Here there is a 70-year-old building on the base, a 6-story building, and Foster needs to design a building which rises above this building to another 44 floors, and he needs to design this building at a modern age, and this is what Foster comes up with. This is a Hearst Tower with the view, and this is the open space which Hearst had designed. Look at the 4-story high space that he is trying to produce. At the base of the tower, the main spatial event is a lobby that occupies the entire floor plate of the old building and rises up through 6 floors. Like a bustling town square, this dramatic space provides access to all parts of the building. It incorporates the main elevator lobby, the Hearst staff cafeteria and auditorium, the mezzanine levels for meetings and special functions. This is that main lobby which they were talking about. It is inside of the building. This is how you see Hearst building from the park. Structurally, the tower has a triangulated diagrid form. a highly efficient solution that uses 20% less steel than a conventionally framed structure. With the corners cut back between the diagonals, it creates a distinctive faceted silhouette on the Manhattan skyline. The building is also significant in environmental terms. 85% of steel used in the building is recycled steel. This is the lobby which they were talking about. You can see the office cafeteria. The first 6 floors is the main connector lobby, which has connections to all parts of the building. Its heating and air conditioning equipment utilizes outside air for cooling and ventilation for 9 months of the year, and it consumes 25% less energy than an equivalent office buildings that complies minimally with the respective state and city codes. As a result, this was the first office building in Manhattan to achieve a gold rating under the U.S. Green Building Council's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design Program, LEED. It has USGBC's LEED program's first gold rating office building in Manhattan. This is another view of the lobby. As a company, Hearst places a high value on the quality of working environment, something it believes it will become increasingly important to its staff in the future, and it is hoped that the Hearst's experience may herald the construction of more environmentally sensitive buildings in the city. The floor of the atrium is paved with heat-conductive limestone. Polyethylene tubing is embedded under the floor and filled with circulating water for cooling the summer and heating in the winter. This is the main escalator which they were talking about. Rain collected on the roof is stored in the tank in the basement for use in the cooling system, to irrigate plants, and for the water sculpture in the main lobby. The atrium features escalators which run through a 3-story water sculpture titled Icefall, a wide waterfall built with thousands of glass panels which cools and humidifies the lobby air. The water element is complemented by a 70-foot tall fresco painting titled Riverlines by artist Richard Long. This is the water feature that they were talking about. Here is the water feature. This is the fresco painting which they were talking about. And here you can clearly see the Art Deco building, the entrance of the building, and how this building takes off from this Art Deco base. The building envelope was designed to limit glare from low-angle sun during the early mornings and evenings. The massing was predetermined by the footprint of existing Hearst building. The design of the tower sought to protect the existing podium whilst extending the building with a distinctive new tower. To minimize solar gain, the building envelopes contain high-performance, low-emission glass with integral roller blinds which can be used to reduce glare. The building is naturally overshadowed by the surrounding buildings, so large skylights were used at the podium level to bring daylight into the atrium space. The atrium contains a radiant floor, tempered water wall, and temperature-controlled walls. In the office spaces, an economizer cycle on the AHUs provide fresh air ventilation for 75% of the year. The design included an upgrade to the local subway station, reinstated an entrance within the building, giving direct access to public transport from the building for the employees. This is the famous triangular diagrids which they were talking about, which reduces more than 20% of structural steel that is being used in the building. Because if we use a square grid, we use 2 sides of the square, because 1 and 2 sides. Now a diagonal of a square is always less than the sum of 2 sides of a triangle. So diagonal is always saves a lot of material for us. The diagrid structure uses 20% less steel than conventionally framed structure, and it was built using 85% recycled steel. Locally sourced materials were used throughout. Harvested rainwater from the roof is fed into a central tank and used for irrigation to feed the water feature. This, alongside water-efficient fixtures and fittings, has led to a 30% reduction in water usage compared to a typical such building. This is the height of the building in comparison with the neighboring buildings. So he was talking about how this building is being overshadowed by neighboring tall buildings, such that they need to create a sunscreen so that they can bring in light from the extent to the lobby. The design ensured that all the existing trees on the site were protected to ensure their long-term vitality. They are now irrigated through rainwater harvesting system. The design preserved the facade of the existing structure and establishes a creative new dialogue between the old and new. The 42-story tower rises above the old building and has resulted in an award-winning addition to the New York skyline. This is the section of the building on the base level. So here you can see the Art Deco building's exterior, which is preserved for the first 6 floors, and they have remodeled the entire space else, and this provides for the structural framing of the remaining floors, 42 floors. And here is the famous entrance lobby with the water wall feature. This is that fresco painting which they spoke about. This is a structural model of the building being worked with scale model. Nikolai Urusov says that in an uncertain age, the Hearst Tower is deeply comforting, a building with confidence in its own values. Richard Lacayo in the Time magazine states that when the Hearst people chose Foster, they knew they were getting an international star. Still, they might not have suspended he would give them the best building to appear in the New York City in decades. This is during construction. This is the lobby, and this is the famous glass panel ice sculpture which they used water in the space. Here is a long list of awards which the Hearst Tower has got. I am not going to bother reading everything. I am just going to let you read through these two slides because it's going to stretch for another slide too. So these are a long list of awards, including the RIBA International Award. And we also see the AIA award here. We've almost come to the end of the episode where we look at the learning outcomes of this lecture. We understood the contemporary structural expressions in banking sector and business typology buildings. We also understood the design philosophies and concept of architect Norman Foster in the new segments of buildings which we saw. The earlier buildings that we saw from him were terminal buildings and other kinds of buildings, and this is the first time we are looking him build a business typology building. With the learning that we have heard from the lecture so far, we should be able to answer these two questions here. Explain the HSBC building, Hong Kong, with reference to the brief that the client issued comparing to the product the architect delivered. Explain the Hearst Tower with sketches and details, explaining the characters which got the LEED gold rating for this building. With this, we have come to an end of this lecture. Hope to meet you again with more case studies, more interesting case studies. Thank you.